But I just want to let y'all know, not only do you have a friend in Jesus, but you got you a friend in me.
Yeah. Listen. What's going on, my boy? It's been a while since the last time we caught up. I see you walking with your head held down. Weight of life has got your shoulders hanging to the ground. Yes, oh, but that's okay, 'cause life can hurt sometimes. God gave you someone to help you fight. Yeah. I've got your back, yeah, that's a fact. Whatever you need, I'll be there. Just remember that you got a friend in me. Yeah, oh, you got a friend in me. Life can get you down, turn that frown around, 'cause you got a friend in me.
We heard that you were going through, but don't you cry, girl, 'cause we've all been there too. Baby girl, don't you know that you shine so bright? Let that hurt fade away and show the world your light. Don't let tragedies rob you of your smile. We're your friends and we'll be fighting right by your side. Just call my phone, 8332, and I'll come running. I'll be right there for you. Oh, yeah, you got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend in me. Life can't get you down, turn that frown around. You got a
Now listen,
friend in
I need y'all to hear me out real quick. Sing, oh. Life can be real rough sometimes, and it might be real hard to see your way. But let me tell you one thing that makes it better. It's having a real good friend who's right there by your side to make everything okay. You feel me? Come on, everybody say you got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend in me. Life can get you down. Oh, you got a friend in me. Sing, you got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend in me. Oh, I know that I can get you down. You gotta tell it one more time. Tell it again. Say no. I know that life can get you down. Turn that frown around. 'Cause you got a friend in me. No. I know that life can get you down. Turn that frown around. 'Cause you got a friend in me. Yeah.
Good morning and welcome to the Pursuing Peace Mental Health Awareness Conference presented by Turner's Chapel AME Church. Today we will focus on sinking the stigma associated with mental health in the Black and Christian communities by heightening the awareness on the topics of depression, anxiety, and trauma, and also encouraging and providing resources for self-care in underserved communities. Please do us a favor and go ahead and like and share this conference, because I'm sure that there are many people that this conference will be beneficial to. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our facilitator for the conference, and that is none other than the minister, Christopher Gibson. Minister Christopher Gibson is a longtime member and dynamic speaker who not only studies the word, but also applies it to his daily living. He is the loving husband of Miss Tiffany Gibson and the proud father of Miss Kirsten Gibson and CJ, Christopher Gibson, which we affectionately know as CJ. So at this time, please welcome Minister Gibson to the platform.
Everyone, I'm very blessed to be a part of this platform to address a very serious issue, and one that's also very personal to me, dealing with mental awareness and mental illness. We do have three very gifted and dynamic presenters today. The first of which is Mrs. Yamina Casey. She received her Bachelor's of Social Work from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and a Master's of Social Work from the University of South Carolina. She's also a licensed clinical social worker. As a 15-year veteran, as a licensed clinical social worker, she is devoted to bringing awareness to the importance of mental health from the beginning of life to the end of life. She enjoys working with a variety of populations through individual and family group therapy. She is a certified sex offender treatment specialist and certified adolescent community reinforcement approach therapist and supervisor. Beyond treatment, Ms. Casey provides career coaching and relocation and job relocation assistance to mental health professionals who are relocating to North Carolina. She invests in the careers of other mental health professionals through facilitating and continuing educational workshops and trainings that include topics such as ethics, therapy, interventions, family strategies, and supervision. Through professional consulting services, she also assists mental and behavioral healthcare agencies expand, improve service delivery, and develop specific programs to the needs of specific communities. Ms. Casey's passion is being creative and developing innovative programs and treatment approaches to address the ever-changing needs identified in the social work field. She believes that now is always the perfect time to start being who you were meant to be. And she's also the executive director at Peculiar Counseling and Consulting Incorporated and Selfless Foundation, Inc. And without further ado, I see Ms. Casey is on the screen now, and I'm sure she is ready to begin her presentation.
Yes. Thank you for that introduction. I am very glad to be here and very glad that I was invited to be a speaker for this conference. The topic of mental health, especially in the Black community, is one that I'm very passionate about and one that I'm glad we are having more conversations about. So my part of the conference is to do some mental health awareness and education. I focused around depression, anxiety, and I guess depression, anxiety, and trauma. And we have a slideshow that we're going to put up for you to discuss some of these topics. And first, we would like to start with discussing depression. Yeah, here it comes. Yes, depression is one thing that affects a lot of people. A lot of people think that they are suffering alone with it. Up here are some of the signs and symptoms for you to be mindful of for yourself and for loved ones and for friends. Some of the signs are feelings of sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, and hopelessness, angry outbursts, being irritable, frustrated over small matters. Some other signs and symptoms of depression include loss of interest in things that you used to do. If you find yourself or a family member or friends that they're just not doing the things that they once enjoyed, that is a clear sign that someone is dealing with depression. Sleep disturbances, tiredness, reduced appetite, and weight loss. If you're not trying to lose weight and you are losing weight, or you're not trying to gain weight and you're gaining weight, sometimes those are big signs of depression. And it's showing that you really have just lost the interest in yourself. And some of the weight loss just it's tied to not eating. When you are depressed and dealing with a lot of things, you find yourself eating less, have less of an appetite. Some other signs of depression are anxiety, slow in thinking, not able to really concentrate and focus on things, frequent and recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts, and a lot of unexplained physical problems. Those are some other signs of depression. If we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about depression and symptoms in teens and children. Sometimes that looks a little different than adults. And as parents or as professionals working with children, some of the common signs and symptoms for depression in children include, again, isolating themselves, sadness, irritable over the smallest little things that really should not bother them. And, they just don't want to be around people. Or if you speak to them, you come into contact with them. And sometimes when you're in depression, you're in like really deep thought. And when somebody interrupts that, you find yourself being very irritable over things that just wouldn't normally bother you. And that's very significant with children. One common thing that I see with diagnosing as a professional is sometimes our children get diagnosed with ADHD. They get diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder and things like that. And depression and trauma is completely skipped over. When people have significant life events, whether it's a loss of a person, especially with children, if they move from one place to another, parents are separating, they have some different changes in the family, or some big event happened at school where they were embarrassed or something, that can change them completely. That can change their mind frame. That can make them not really want to be around people. And again, that goes back to them being moody and irritable. So with children, just pay attention if they are just more irritable than usual. Sometimes if they're having some separation issues, they might be more clingy. So you can go from one extreme to the other to where children are isolating themselves, not really wanting to be around them, or they can go to where they just never want to let you out of their sight. So look for these things with children, unexplained pain and not wanting to go to school. That's a big sign to pay attention to with children as well. If they refuse to go to school, or again, their appetite changes, just their whole mood change, that's a sign that something is going on mentally with children and teens. So we like to educate people on how to really be aware of that with different attitude and behavior changes with children and teens. Another symptom, especially with teens, is like I said, anger. If they just get angry over anything, poor performance in school. If they were once straight A/B students and their grades have completely failed, it's a sign that they're really not focusing or not able to focus on their grades. So something has changed mentally. So that's something to pay attention to. Feeling misunderstood or extremely sensitive. Those are other things, especially with teens. Those are the very interesting years. And sometimes teens just get a bad name, or they're going through these teenage stages, or they're just a teenager, or that's normal. But, if you know your child, or if you know the children that you're working with in a professional capacity, whether, you're a teacher or you're a therapist, even down to the bus driver, if you know a change in a child's behavior, something, could have happened mentally that is causing them to be depressed. So these are just some of the signs to pay attention to with teens specifically. One other thing with teens when they are dealing with some depression more recently is they are experimenting with types of different drugs to try to address some of the depression that they're dealing with. They might be sad and don't really know how to deal with it. They might be really worried about stuff and don't know how to deal with it. And sometimes trying some drugs or trying some alcohol is the only way that soothes their mind to where they really get to a point where they're not thinking about stuff a lot. So experimenting with drugs and all of that, when you know your child has not really been around all of that, is another sign that, something else is going on, or your teen is trying to suppress something that's going on with them mentally. So those are some different depression symptoms with children and teens to really look out for. Our next slide, we're going to talk about some of the depression symptoms with older adults. This is very dear to my heart because sometimes people think that older people they're not supposed to want to go around people. They're going to want to sit home. They're going to want to just be to themselves. And a lot of older people deal with adjustment issues to the life changes that are going on with them. Most of the causes for depression with older people is just that. It's adjusting to life. You're not able to do the things you used to do. You were very active. People are not coming around as much as they used to. Sometimes you can't drive like you wanted to. You're less independent and more dependent on others. And that causes some serious adjustment issues that really leads to depression with older adults. Some of the things to be mindful of older adults is just being very, with older adults, it's personality changes, physical aches and pains. As we get older, we're going to have a lot of aches and pains, but fatigue, loss of appetite, sleep problems, all of those things are things to be mindful of with older adults and depression. They often want to stay home rather than going out and socialize. Sometimes that's due to physical changes in their body, and they don't want to be a burden on other people sometimes. And they just don't want to deal with the physical ailments and challenges that they have actually going around people. So sometimes it's guilt of not wanting to be a burden. And this can cause older adults to really sink down into depression like really fast. And we just think that, they're older, they want to be by themselves, they don't want to be bothered. But always check in with older adults because their depression looks a little bit different and it has some different causes. And most of the time it's usually adjusting to the changes in life. Some of us are very independent right now. And as we go through the different life cycles, things are going to change. And we're going to have to adjust our life. And that whole adjustment period, some people can handle it well. Some people do not handle it well at all. And sometimes it just takes them a little more support in order to be able to handle the changes in life. So just be mindful of that with older adults and what depression might look like with older adults. One question that we have when we do clinical assessments, moving to the next slide, is what makes it a diagnosis and what makes it normal human behavior? Depression symptoms, along with other mental health symptoms, when it starts to affect your life in several different categories, it moves from just normal human behavior to more of a diagnosis. Normal sadness due to disappointment, loss, major life events, failing to meet goals. We're supposed to have that feeling inside of us. We're supposed to, be sad when we lose someone. We're supposed to have a little bit of sadness if we're not meeting certain goals or different things happen in life. When the Twin Towers were hit, we were supposed to have feelings about all of that. But when does it actually affect your life? When does it actually stop you from going to work? Are you calling into work a little bit more than usual? Are you not talking to your family, engaging with your family like you usually do? Are you not doing the things that you would typically do? That determines what's a diagnosis and what's normal. So going down the list here, if you have some angry outburst and it's justifiable, somebody hit your car and you just go off, you're arguing, you're fussing, this and that, you can justify that. You went off because someone hit your car. It made you upset. That's explainable. That's justifiable. But if you're just sitting somewhere and someone said, "Hey, how you doing?" and you just get mad, upset, angry, and you have an outburst, that's a sign that something is wrong. When you just have an outburst over something that is kind of simple and something that you wouldn't normally explode over. So it's normal and it's human behavior to be angry, to have that feeling, but when it actually disrupts your life, causes you to lose friends, causes you to lose family, and it's causing people to isolate away from you, then that's when you should try to seek some help about it and consider you might have something else going on. Again, sadness is normal. We're supposed to feel those things, but if you're sad 3 days out of 7, that's a problem. If you're sad when someone passes away, you're sad for a week or two, that's pretty normal. But if it goes over into a month, 2 months, and you're not able to function, then something is going on and you're not really going through that, handling whatever happened in your life in a healthy way. So getting help for that is very important, and that kind of distinguishes you from having a diagnosis and like normal human behavior. So with occasionally not sleeping at night, that's normal. Sometimes we have different things on our mind, but if you're not sleeping 4 or 5 nights out of the week, or you're just not sleeping at all, then something else is going on. Tiredness or lack of energy can be explained. If you have more activity and you're just tired for 3 days straight in a row, you're getting older, you've been doing a lot, that can be explained. But if the only thing that you do is get up in the morning, you might go to work or you might do something for 4 or 5 hours, but you're just tired all the time, that is something else going on. So it's taking a physical toll on your body, and something else might be going on with you mentally that's causing you to just be drained and be tired all the time. Physical ailments that can be explained. Sometimes when people are dealing with depression, they have physical pain in their body that cannot be explained. They go to a doctor and doctor's like, I don't see anything. We can't find anything. But if you have some physical ailments that cannot be explained after you've checked in with your primary care physician, then it's a sign that something else might be going on. And it's things that can be explained separates it from what can actually be a diagnosis in depression. If you're able to maintain relationships and interact with people, chances are, your depression, your sadness is not really a serious diagnosis. Able to maintain your normal routine, that separates it from being a diagnosis, and able to attend work and school with no adverse effects. That lets you know that, you're dealing with some sadness, you're dealing with some anxiety, whatever, but you're still able to maintain your lifestyle and interact with people and function in several areas. So what makes, a depression diagnosis different from normal human behavior is some of the things that I've just outlined here. Again, it's normal for us to be sad and to be angry and to have feelings, but when they go into overdrive and it affects our life, our family life, our life with our friends, our job and our school, that's what kind of makes it more of a diagnosis. And we encourage people to try to get some counseling, some help when it starts to affect different things in your life. All right. On the next one, we have information about when to actually see a doctor. If you feel depressed, make an appointment with your doctor, your healthcare professional. You can always start out by seeing your primary care physician and letting them know what's going on, and they can refer you to mental health professionals. You can seek one on your own. Seek one out on your own. And when we say mental health professionals, that includes like a doctor, a psychiatrist, anybody in that field that can, get it started. But the worst thing you can do is just let things linger on for over a month, because then you just really get set in your little habits and you feel like you don't want to get help. You can fix it on yourself, or this might pass. So the goal is to just be proactive when you see a lot of these symptoms clustered together in under a month. If you are sad for like a month straight, angry, very irritable, if your behaviors and feelings have changed and they've been consistent for a month straight, then that's a good time to actually seek some help. The next thing we're going to talk about is I think it's anxiety. Anxiety is a big one. This is another one that people think that they suffer alone. But if you're in a room with about 5 people, at least 3 of them have some anxiety issues going on with them. And it's so many different types of anxiety that exist, that, you can be dealing with them and not really know that other people around you are dealing with anxiety, but just on different levels with different things. Some of the signs and symptoms are feeling nervous and restless most of the time, having a sense of impending danger, having increased heart rate, breathing rapidly, sweating, trembling, feeling weak and tired, trouble concentrating, having trouble sleeping, GI problems. If you have an upset stomach all the time, or when it comes to certain situations, that's a sign that you have anxiety related to that situation. Having difficulty controlling your worry, and having the urge to avoid things that trigger anxiety. Those are some of the signs and symptoms. And again, we have different types of anxiety. One is agoraphobia, where people have a real fear of being outside, don't really like to leave the house. That is very real, and that affects a lot of people. And a lot of people are not aware of just how many people that affects around us every day. Anxiety disorder due to medical condition. This includes symptoms of intense anxiety or panic that are directly caused by a physical health problem. That's different from anxiety that you worry about. Some people do have medical issues that create anxiety. Most common is generalized anxiety disorder. This includes persistent and excessive anxiety and worry about activities or events, even ordinary routine issues. The worry is out of proportion to the actual circumstance, is difficult to control, and affects how you feel physically. It often occurs along with other anxiety disorders or depression. General anxiety disorder does come together with depression. Sometimes people will go to a professional, they'll get diagnosed with anxiety disorder. Sometimes they'll get diagnosed with depression. Under depression, anxiety is included. So it is one of the symptoms under depression. So if you're really not dealing with a lot of depression and you just deal with anxiety in certain situations, then that's what really separates an anxiety disorder from depression. With depression, you can have anxiety about certain situations that are causing your depression. So it's a lot of underlying issues between the two diagnoses and under anxiety. Panic disorder, that is involves repeated episodes of sudden feelings of intense anxiety and fear or terror that reach a peak within minutes. Panic disorder is let's say you're out in public and you've heard people say they have a panic attack. So something acute has brought on so much stress in a person's body that it affects their breathing, their sweating profusely, and they're just really not able to function, and it happens really quickly. So that's like a panic disorder that is characterized under anxiety. The next show, we have some other forms of anxiety. Selective mutism, that's one that is mostly common with children. It's consistent failure of children to speak in certain situations, such as school, even when they speak in other situations. This is huge in the school setting with children. We do have children that do not like to talk at school at all. What I found from my work with children is that they have to go to school. It's the law. So they will go. But when they get there, it's so overwhelming and it's so much anxiety that they prefer not to say a word. And some people think this is kind of strange, but there are children that have this. They will get home, play, talk, and do whatever it is. But you will get so many reports from the school, they will not say a word. They're being defiant. They will not talk in class. I ask them questions and they will not answer me. The principal, we sent him to the principal's office, and he got to the principal's office and would not say a word. Then we went outside and he was, playing with his friends or doing this. And, parents might be completely oblivious about the issues the anxiety that children might have in school, especially in today. Children can be mean in school. This is a completely different environment that I grew up in school. And the things that they are exposed to in school, that they have to deal with in school, the social pressure and all of that causes anxiety to have increased with children over the past 10 years. It's a lot of anxiety with our children in school, and we do treat children with selective mutism just for school settings. And that's not very common, but it does exist, and it's real. And a lot of times children will get diagnosed with ODD, again, oppositional defiant disorder, when it's really an anxiety or a trauma disorder that they're dealing with. Going down the list, you have separation anxiety disorder. You have social anxiety disorder, specific phobias. Arachnophobia is for spiders. We have a whole lot of different phobias covered under anxiety, things that just really make people anxious. And then other specified anxiety disorders are included under anxiety disorder. So as you can see, anxiety has a lot of topics, a lot of types, and it is very common among everyone that we come in contact with every day. All right, our next slide, what makes it different from normal human behavior? When you're walking in the dark down the street trying to get to your car at night, you should have a little fear or a little worried or be aware of your environment that somebody can jump out, anything can happen. Those anxious feelings are situational, and they're there for a reason, because you need to be prepared for things to happen. What separates normal human behavior from anxiety being, diagnosed, is that you have this feeling all the time. You have this adrenaline running through your body, whether you are sitting at home watching TV, whether you go to the mailbox, if you are sitting in church, if you go to the DMV. It's the constant anxiety, feeling anxious in situations that do not really justify you being anxious. That's what separates it. We're supposed to have a certain level of awareness that's protecting us. You go back to the fight or flight theory, where you have to be ready to run or fight, if something comes on. But if you have that feeling all the time, 3 or 4 days a week, in situations that you cannot justify feeling that way, then you might have an anxiety disorder. So it's normal to feel certain things, because we're supposed to. We're human. We're supposed to have these things inside of us that alert us when danger is around. But what separates it from an anxiety is that you feel that way all the time, and that's what causes the GI issues, the stomach issues, the upset stomach, the sweaty hands, and all of that is when you constantly feel this and it's in excess. Sleep is not constantly disturbed. This is a sign that, it's not a diagnosis. It might be, normal. You worry about things. You're not isolating from people or places. Worry can be linked to specific things going on in your life. If you haven't paid the light bill, it's normal to worry about the lights getting turned off. It is perfectly normal to worry about that. If you have a little bit of gas in your car, it's on E. It's normal to worry about things like that. If you have a test coming up, you're in school, that's normal worry. What separates this from a diagnosis is that you have this constant worry and these constant anxious feelings for not a lot of reasons. So it's a good time to seek help, to help you process those things, to see where the anxiety is coming from, to see the onset on it, to see what caused it, to determine whether you really have a diagnosis, and or you can just determine what's normal human behavior and emotions. All right. So the next slide with again, when to seek help. If you feel like you're worrying too much and it's interfering with your work relationships and other parts of your life. If you fear, worry, if your fear, worry, or anxiety is upsetting you and it's difficult to control. If you feel depressed, have trouble with alcohol or drug use, or have other mental health concerns, you might want to go ahead and seek help for that. But again, anything that is lasting over 30 days, we want you to try to reach out to get some help. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have to be on medication. It just means whatever it is you're anxious about, whatever it is you're worried about in life, you might need somebody to help you talk through it, to manage your anxiety, to teach you some techniques to help you relax when you get in those anxious situations. The next one is trauma signs and symptoms, and this is a huge one. Some of the signs and symptoms are intrusive memories of the traumatic event that occurred. Symptoms of intrusive memories may include recurrent, unwanted, distressing memories of the traumatic event, reliving the traumatic event as if it were happening again, upsetting dreams or nightmares about the traumatic event, severe emotional distress or physical reactions to something that reminds you of the traumatic event. Trauma, again, is something that occurs to people daily. Trauma does not look the same with everyone. With children and teens, if they sometimes live in a neighborhood that has a lot of violence, even if they have not experienced violence, seeing it or being fearful or having anxiety about it in their neighborhood, even hearing about what happened in their neighborhood from neighbors and stuff, can be very traumatizing to people. So you can actually get traumatized by hearing other people's story, talking about it, and just having fear of what might happen. Or you might relive a story that someone has told you, which causes trauma. So with children, trauma looks completely different. And with adults, it looks a little different too. But these are some of the signs and symptoms. We're going to continue on the next slide, which has more signs and symptoms. Avoidance, trying to avoid thinking or talking about the traumatic event. avoiding places, activities, or people that remind you of it. People that have been in car accidents, that's traumatizing to people. Sometimes they will not ride on the highway anymore. Sometimes they won't go to a certain side of town. Sometimes they won't ride in the type of vehicle that they were in the accident in. So accidents can trigger a lot of trauma with people, as well as, small things. So trauma looks completely different to every single person. What might be traumatic for one person might not be traumatic for me, and vice versa. So these are just some of the signs and symptoms of trauma. And we can go to the next slide so I can stay on time here. And this is just some changes in physical and emotional reactions. And when to explore help. Again, if you are having these symptoms, if you're having disturbing thoughts and feelings about the traumatic event for more than a month, and that's the key thing, more than a month. And I've said this with all of the different diagnoses. If these things occur for 30 days or more, then it's time to try to talk to someone or get some help to help you deal with this. You can try to manage it on your own, but sometimes you just need someone to help you process it, to talk about it, to get it out of your system, to help you organize your thoughts. But if anything, the key is the 30 days. If you're having problems and you notice that it has lasted over 30 days, that's the perfect time to actually get some help. Down here on each slide that I have when to explore help, it has the contact number for the crisis line, who to contact. And I think later on we're having one of the presenters to share other resources with you about that. So when to get help, keep that 30-day mark in mind. And if you have signs, symptoms of anything that we've talked about or other ones, just be sure to seek out a professional to try to help you get some assistance with these diagnoses. So thank you for letting me share. And that's it for my part.
Thank you, Ms. Casey. We thoroughly enjoyed that presentation, and we hope you'll be around for the question and answer session later on.
I'll be here.
Thank you. All right. Our next presenter is Ms. Chipo Ash. She is an associate therapist and healing coordinator at the RAGE project. Chipo Ash is an associate marriage and family therapist who specializes in healing within the Black community. Chipo focuses on trauma, depression, and anxiety in youth and young adults. She's a graduate of the University of San Francisco, where she obtained a Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology, with an emphasis on marriage and family therapy. Chipo considers therapy a collaborative effort between both client and therapist. Her goal is to help clients discover the tools to heal themselves. Ms. Ash is also a professor and counselor at Sacramento City College. And without further ado, our next presenter is Chipo Ash.
Thank you for that introduction. I wanted to make sure I say that I'm super honored to share this space with all of you. So thank you again for having me. So I waited to say this in person. I wanted to make sure that everyone knew my connection to Greensboro. I went to Bennett College for my undergrad, and I lived in Greensboro for about 10 years before me and my husband and our kids decided to move back to my hometown of Sacramento. And so I can serve the youth out here as well. So I do want you all to know that I rep Greensboro as well. Yeah. So I wanted, and I purposely kept that out of my bio so that I could say that myself. So I'm going to just jump right on in. So my slide should be coming up shortly. And while my slides are coming up, I wanted to talk about someone from my youth. Okay, I see what you're talking about in terms of the format. Okay, it's okay. We'll work with it. It's all good. So I remember this girl from growing up. I grew up in kind of a mega church out here in Sacramento, California. And so I remember she used to have marks on her arms and on her legs. But I'm a kid, so I was a kid, so I didn't really know what those marks were. And what they meant. And so now that we are adults, I met her in adulthood again, saw her. And she told me that she was cutting, which is a form of self-harm. And so she's kind of like opened up especially when she found out that I was practicing therapy in Sacramento. She said, yeah, when I was a kid, I was depressed and I used to cut. And I said, okay, I saw those marks on your arm, but since we were kids, I didn't know what they meant. Now as I'm practicing therapy, when I see cuts on someone's arm, I know what they mean. I know what they can mean, excuse me. But as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, I didn't understand that. So then my next question was, okay, so what were your parents doing? Like, your dad was a whole deacon. Like, what was going on? And she said, honestly, they didn't really, do anything. They would tell me to pray about it. They would pray for me. They would get other people in the church to pray. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad that they were supportive in that way. What mental health services did they provide? She said, none. And I said, okay. And so that's what kind of connected me that there might be a slight disconnect with mental health and praying. If we can go on to my next slide, please. So in the same way that you would seek a doctor or a healer for a physical ailment, it is equally important to do so for your mind. So there's a stigma about seeking help or seeking mental wellness. People don't want to be labeled. So there's a term that people often use. That person is crazy. I'm choosing not to say the word. And so people don't want that label. And so what happens is, because people don't want to be labeled for going and seeking out help, they suffer in silence. But there are some things that we just learned, that there's some things that you particularly need to contact and get help for, especially if they're going on for a certain amount of time. So just kind of reiterating what has already been said, things that you definitely should tap into your resources for. If you're having depressive thoughts, you're thinking about self-harming, you're thinking about harming someone else, you're having anxiety, you're hearing voices. These are all things that prayer absolutely will help, but also tapping into the resources around you as well. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you so much. So this is a scripture, and my mom actually helped me find this scripture, because I was like, what would be a really good scripture? And then I remember this one. There's different versions of this. So what I always learned when I was a kid was just prayer without work is dead. But James 2:17, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. So for those of you who have ever played a sport or currently play a sport, do you all train your bodies? For those who go to school, do you study? For those who might have play an instrument, do you practice playing your instrument? In the same way that you train and you mold and you do all the things to make your craft or your hobby or your sport or anything like that, like the best of your ability, it's the same thing you have to do in terms of your mental health. So with your mind, you connect with healthy coping skills and you connect with self-care. So what is that? Coping mechanisms, which were talked about before. Coping mechanisms would be anything that brings you back to you. What makes you feel centered? That's more self-care, but coping mechanisms and self-care actually can coincide. I gave you all the definition for self-care, excuse me. Coping mechanisms is what people do when they're trying to deal with a situation or a mental disorder or anything of that nature. So some healthy coping skills might be speaking to a counselor, speaking to a therapist, connecting with someone and letting them know that you need help. Unhealthy coping skills could be drugs and alcohol, self-harm. Those are all called maladaptive coping skills, and they're actually quite harmful to you. So what we would like for you all to do is to tap into healthy coping skills. And then that leads into self-care. So with self-care for me is whatever brings me back to center me. So if that's reading your Bible, if that's meditation, if that's exercising. For myself, I like to write. So writing and exercising bring me back to center. But sometimes you're in the midst of a situation and you can't always get to your coping skills that really help you, like exercising. If you're in the middle of an argument with your parents, or you're on the job and you get into it with your boss, you can't do a set of jumping jacks right then and there, right? So I wanted to use some of my time to do a quick breathing exercise. No, it sounds random, but I've learned that with breathing exercises, it helps me come back to myself, and almost like a placeholder until I can get to my better self-care. So my favorite self-care is always going to be writing and then exercise. But sometimes, like if I get into it with my boss or parents or anything like that, I can't always do that. So I breathe. And I know it sounds like wild, but I just simply breathe. Okay. So we're going to do a quick breathing exercise so I can kind of let people, show people what it might look like if you're in the midst of something intense, to simply breathe. So what I do is I do a deep breath in and deep breath out. I would love for you all to try it for me, out there in the virtual world. I close my eyes. If I'm in a safe space, I make sure my jaws are unclenched. I make sure my fists are unballed and my feet are as centered as possible. And then I breathe in. And breathe out. Deep breath in. And a deep breath out. And then I repeat these words in my head. Who am I? What is my purpose? What is my joy? Deep breath in. And deep breath out. It's okay if you're those of us who have asthma, it's okay. Just do as best as you can, okay? Deep breath in and deep breath out. Who am I? What is my purpose? What is my joy? Deep breath in and deep breath out. Last time, deep breath in and deep breath out. And return to the space. Okay, so I wanted to do that because I wanted to show you all something that aids in my coping mechanisms in the moment. But sometimes if you're really in the midst of something going on, you can't do that long breathing exercise. So believe it or not, a quick breath has helped me out. I've been in the middle of some very intense things and I've just kind of had to turn around and compose myself. And I do a quick, you want to count to 5 in your head real quick. And believe it or not, it's helped bring me back to myself in the moment. So now combine that with prayer. Do a quick breathing exercise and whatever prayer is going to help you in that moment. I've had people tell me, some of my clients tell me, I just said a prayer that I wouldn't beat that girl up. And I'm like, okay, if that's what helped you in the moment, I'm not going to knock it. So prayer and action, they go hand in hand. If you could please go to my next slide. So you can do both. You can pray and seek mental health services. I think about my friend growing up who we didn't know that she was suffering and stuff. I also think about the fact that a lot of our family might not know how to handle someone saying, "Hey, I'm feeling depressed," or "Hey, mom and dad, I'm sad all the time," or I always feel like my heart's racing, but I can't explain it, which, can point to anxiety. My thoughts, they're always racing. We might not know, but I do want you all to know that historically and biblically, our ancestors prayed and meditated and sought counsel. So I always think about a group in West Africa, and I don't exactly remember what country, but I know they're from West Africa, who was talking about some of their mating rituals. Some of their mating rituals involve them seeking out an elder before they get married. And I'm like, that sounds familiar. They're seeking counsel. Like they're seeking marriage counsel. And so I was thinking, this is a group that has very little interaction with Western cultures, with European cultures, and even still, they have their own form of counseling. Meditation. There has been more than one story in the Bible where people went out and communed with God by themselves or communed with themselves. So when we are breaking down the stigma of mental health, it's also important to break down the stigma in particular that Black people don't seek mental health. It's important to break down the stigma that mental health is only for one group of people. It's also important to break down the stigma that seeking help makes you CRAZY, because it doesn't. It just, seeking help just simply means you need help. So I'm so excited to hear our third speaker, because I know that she's going to connect you all with some resources. But I do want to say within my time that you can absolutely do both. You seeking counsel, seeking therapy is just simply using the tools that God has provided. I do want you all to know that my infant is crying downstairs. So if you all hear her crying, excuse me for that. But I want you all to know that you can do both. You can commune with God, you can strengthen your relationship through prayer and meditation and reading your Bible, and you can connect with the resources that God has put on earth for you in the same way that you would seek out a doctor if something was going on with your body, correct? If something was going on with your body, you would ask the people around you, or you yourself would look for healing. You would look for a doctor. You would look for maybe a specialist in whatever it is, if it's something that doctor specializes in. It's the same way with your mind. Yes. Okay. If we can move on to the next. If the words come up, no worries. So the stigma that about mental health, that you cannot pursue mental health, you can only pursue, you can only pray, is, I feel like it's something that's purposeful through some systemic things. That's a talk for a different day. But there's certain things that have been made that is outside of the Black community. So seeking out mental health has been a thought process that has been planted that is not for us. So I want that to be something that we kind of strike down in our head, that's purposeful and it's wrong. Go through my notes. Our community is operating off of generational transmissions of trauma. So basically, most of us are operating off the mold of our grandparents, and they operated off of the mold of their grandparents, and so on and so on. So generational transmission of trauma is just passing down the same stuff. So sometimes with certain things, it is passed on. And in our ancestors had coping skills, but now we have more. We can tap into the therapists in our neighborhood. We can see if our church, what our church has set up for in terms of psychotherapy and counseling, and how that connects with our relationship with God. All of those things can be things that aid in our healing. So I wanted to make sure that one of the last things that I focused on was just talking about how do you approach this thing. So we talked about, not we, but I guess us as the collective, talked about how depression and anxiety shows up with adults, but how do you even approach a loved one? What do you say? I know that the girl who I grew up with, she said that her parents just kind of saw the cutting on her wrist. And from there, they were like, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that?" And she said, "I don't know. Like, it just brings me a release." She felt that self-harming was a release. Before it gets to that point, it would be awesome if you could tap in. And I'm saying tap in because I want to make sure I'm not being too hardcore in terms of like my language. But I would like for people to tap in with resources. So I'm going to give an example of how you might approach your parent if you're a child, if you're still living under your parents' roof. So one of the things that you can say is, I'm feeling sad often. I'm feeling sad all the time. The sadness doesn't seem to go away. Things that used to make me happy no longer make me happy. I don't know if it's depression, but I would really like to start feeling like myself again. Is there a way that you can help? Now, there are some times where you have a reaction from parents, like my friend did, who were like, "Oh no, we'll pray or we'll talk to pastor and stuff." That's awesome. Connect with your school counselor as well. If you're not able to seek therapy with your parents, your school counselor has to provide you with most schools, excuse me. I don't want to speak to every school. Most schools, if you let them know what's going on, they usually provide you with some type of counseling service through the school. I myself have gone to different high schools out here in Sacramento and spoke to youth who needed counseling services and therapy. I was able to get some of my hours doing it that way. So if you're unable to get help from one resource, I want you to tap into other resources. It's important. It's also a way for you to kind of get in control of your mental wellness. For adults, a simple Google search, tap into your insurance, see what your insurance provides in connection with your job. Most insurances provide some type of mental wellness or mental health therapy service. You just have to see how many sessions are provided. I know, for instance, out here, one of my friends, she's with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and she's able to have 6 sessions a year. It doesn't seem like a lot, but even connecting with a therapist or counselor one time, 2 times can be life changing, depending on the content in which you all are speaking about. Share, I have all my notes. So I want you all to know that there's certain things that don't necessarily go away, but they can be helpful. So, for instance, depression. Depression is not always, depending on how severe the depression is. It's not always something that's going to go away immediately. But depending on, I guess, depending on how long you're in therapy, depending on how long you are, I guess, connected with the resources outside of therapy, um, it can lessen. It can lessen. And then there are some times that depression can go away. But I do want you all to know that you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to continue letting things like go into your emotional. I always call it an emotional pot. Think of your emotions like a pot, and think about how what happens when that pot gets too full. It boils over, right? Ignoring these things, suppressing these things, usually lead to a rough period in life. So, as mentioned, yelling or being upset at those around you. As I mentioned, self-harming. All of those things can contribute to suppressing things and not speaking to those around you. So, like I said, you don't have to suffer in silence. You absolutely can commune with God and seek the tools that He has given to all of us. And yeah, that's my spill. Thank you so much.
you, Ms. Ash. You touched on some very great points, particularly the point about just dealing with prayer. Prayer does change things. We all know that, but sometimes you require a little bit more. And just because you require some therapy, or even in some cases, God forbid, some medication, it does not mean that you are the C word. And that's something that we have to overcome in our community. So I greatly appreciate your contribution there and sharing your information and your expertise with us.
Absolutely.
And we hope to see you in the question and answer session coming up shortly.
Yes, I will be there. Thank you.
All right. Our final, last but definitely not least, our final panelist is Dr. Kelly O. Dixon. She is the co-founder of Growth LLC. Dr. Kelly Dixon accepted Christ in her life at the very young age of 11 years old, and has since felt God's call to work as a compass for those who seek to follow the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. With a passion for human potential and holistic approach to life and healing, you will quickly discover why family, friends, and colleagues consider her the go-to girl for personal and professional direction. She uses these skills in her current role as an ordained minister, pastoral counselor, therapist, and life and business consultant. Kelly holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in political science and a Lean certification from NC State University. She received her master's degree from Liberty University in professional counseling and human services. Kelly most recently obtained her doctorate of ministry degree in family therapy from Amridge University. Dr. Dixon, more affectionately known as Dr. Kelly, has been called to help people create healthy philosophies and connections between their mental and spiritual health and well-being. Dr. Kelly is a member and serves on the dance ministry at Galilee Missionary Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She is a co-founder of Growth LLC, an organization started with her husband, Evan Dixon, that aims to educate, empower, and encourage youth in every area of their life level. Her most fulfilling role is a wife, mother, and entrepreneur. And without further ado, our last but definitely not least final presenter is Dr. Kelly O. Dixon.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you guys doing today? How are you doing today?
Well.
Good. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. I was super excited when I was asked to be here. I don't have any fancy slides, but my portion is about resources associated with mental health in the Black church. I first want to say this is a phenomenal journey that we're having today with this topic. And my dad is telling me to center my camera, so I hope I'm center now. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm just excited to be here today. So this is wonderful. A little bit about my journey before I start talking about resources is that, and it kind of all circles down together, but I was put in a unique situation because living in North Carolina has provided us with something that not every state has, which is this idea that you can blend psychology and theology together and it be okay. There's only 7 states that allow licensed fee-based pastoral counselors to be advocates or to serve as mental therapists and be provided a fee. Every pastor can be a counselor. So as long as you are a pastor, you can counsel anyone in your congregation as long as you don't charge a fee. That's anywhere in the country. But only 6 or 7 states in the United States offer this idea that you can be a fee-based licensed pastoral counselor. When God told me to take this journey, I was like, I wanted to be an attorney. I was not prepared to be a therapist. I thought I was going to have 6 figures and be flying around the country and working with youth and doing some amazing things. But God was like, Kelly, I need you to do this. He found me the school. It was accredited. And this idea that I could be a licensed fee-based pastoral counselor where I could intersect theology and spirituality and help people develop healthy philosophies around their mental and their spiritual health is a phenomenal thing. So one of the resources, I said the first thing I had to do was look up the definition of resources. And resource is an action or a strategy that you may adopt during times of adverse circumstance. And when I heard the definition, I was like, exactly. So the amazing piece is that prayer is a weapon, but therapy is a strategy. So whenever we go into battle, we want to make sure that we have weapons, and that's prayer. But we also want to make sure that we strategize before we get there, and that's therapy. So that's how we could intersect the two. And I want to start off by explaining one thing, since we're talking about the Black church. I was a pastoral counselor at a church in Kernersville, North Carolina, where it was phenomenal because they have a mental health ministry. I visited several churches that are predominantly white, and each of those churches have a mental health ministry set up for their congregation. They have an idea and they have mastered this plan that it is so important for their congregation to have access to mental health that involves spirituality. So whenever a person in the congregation needed help, all they had to do was call a hotline associated that went to a voicemail that only the counselors of that church could use. And then from there, we would answer the voicemail, schedule the appointment, and then counsel them at the church in an unknown place that only if you were getting counseling, you knew where it existed. This is something that I feel like the Black church is missing as a major resource. In every church, there has to be at least one social worker, one certified or licensed mental health professional. We need to make sure or start to set up that as a resource for our people. When you go to a church, we shouldn't have to figure out or find somewhere for our church members to go when they're suffering with their mental health issues. As a Black community, we need to make sure this is at the forefront of what we're doing as a major resource for our congregation. Mental health is one of the things that broke even a king in the Bible, okay? Because he wasn't able to deal with his mental health. We need to make sure as a Black church, we start to set up mental health ministries in our church so that our congregation has the ability to go to someone who is licensed, who is certified, and who is able to address the issues beyond what our pastors can address. Pastors are great and they are wonderful for spiritual advice, but we need to make sure that we start to build main resources for our mental health, our emotional health, and our spiritual health all at the same time, and develop counseling ministries at all of our churches because it's super, super important. Now let's talk about some national resources. So national resources are resources that if you have a breakdown anywhere in the country, you can rely on these organizations to provide you with resources. And that's the National Alliance for Mental Health. Then there's the Mental Health America. There's an Alliance for Anxiety and Depression. And then there's something called the Trevor Project, which addresses LGBTQIA plus community. That's a very touchy topic for churches, but I know for a fact that there are people who are dealing with that, teenagers who are dealing with identity crisis and that feel like that God doesn't love them, that God hates them because they're dealing with an identity crisis and they need access to mental health. The National Alliance for Mental Health is another organization. The Suicide Hotline. If you're dealing with anything, you could go to your computer and Google mental health near me, and you'll be able to find a resource in your community. Another reason people say that they're unable to attend therapy, number one, is because the church does not accept or condone therapy. They feel like if you pray, that's enough. But prayer, again, is a weapon that we use against warfare and spiritual aspect. But therapy is a strategy that we can use on an everyday life to deal with what we're going through every day. So again, that's the National Alliance for Mental Health. That's the Mental Health America. That's anxiety and depression. And the Trevor Project deals with teenagers who are going through an identity crisis, or those who feel like they need to be helped in dealing with the LGBTQIA community. Then we live in North Carolina, so I wanted to provide some local resources. The first one is, I want to let you know that North Carolina is ranked number 23 best states for mental health because of our access and the ability to access mental health facilities. So locally, the first thing I would do is call my insurance company. Call my insurance company. A lot of times we don't want to deal with people. We don't want to talk to them. You may not feel like it, but instead of going straight to calling a therapist and having them say, no, we don't accept your insurance, or I need to call first, those kinds of things, when you're going through a mental health issue, this idea of rejection can make you not want to take the next step. But if you call your insurance company first, they can provide you detailed benefit ideas. So this is the benefits that we cover or we don't cover. This is the therapist you can go to. This is the type of therapist you can go to. This is what we cover. All those things, believe it or not, is the first step in going the right direction. So you call your mental health provider, your insurance company, and you say, I am seeking or want to know about my coverage for mental health services. And then from there, you'll be able to better have an understanding and an idea of what direction you need to go. Right now, because of COVID, they have changed the laws concerning mental health, and teletherapy is now covered under mental health. So that's just a very good resource. So as long as you're going to a licensed mental health therapist or certified mental health therapist, depending on your insurance, you will be covered to do teletherapy. Let's talk number two. Let's get deeper. And this is more for my teens and my younger adults. They have text therapy. They have text therapy. Mind blowing, right? I got a text message the other day that said, how are you feeling, from a random number? And I was like, I'm just that curious. I said, I'm feeling great. How are you feeling? And it was a Voxer, which is an automated text that sent back and said, glad you're doing well. Need help with anything else? And as I had this interaction with this robot, I realized that it was information to text therapy. If I'm a teenager, I may not want to get on the phone and talk to someone right away. But guess what we do every single day? Text. We text. So we find out how we can have access to text therapy. If I'm in a situation where I'm feeling anxious and I can't pick up the phone and call my therapist, and I'm sitting in an environment where maybe I can't get up and walk away, then I can pull out my cell phone and I can have access to a therapist, and I can text them back and forth and get to a conclusion. Another one is to call your church office. Call your church office, and this goes back to our Black church and the Black community. Call your church office. The church office should know right off the bat who is available for your congregation concerning mental health. This should not be an assistant pastor. This should not be the pastor of the church if they do not have the ability or the credentials or the license to address mental health issues. But there should be someone at the church office who has a list of local therapists specifically dealing with people of color who have reasonable rates on a sliding scale, who is known to help. They should have access to that list. I shouldn't call my church and say, I don't know, or let me get back to you. Because when it comes to mental health, sometimes it's not enough time to get back to a person. They're already gone. They've already decided that life is not worth living. They've already decided that I can't do this anymore. But if they call your church office and you have a list of resources available to them, then ma'am, let me get you to the right person. They don't have to tell you too much about their mental situation. They shouldn't have to tell you their name, their address. You don't need to know that it's sister so-and-so. They need to just be able to call your church office and say, hi, I know that you guys don't have a mental health ministry set up, which you should by the end of 2021, but maybe you don't. Maybe you get a call tomorrow. You need to make sure that you have a list of resources that when people pick up the phone and call, you're able to say, yes, I can provide you with so and so and so and so, and this is what they do, and they go on a sliding scale. They accept insurance or they don't accept insurance, and this is how they do it. You should have one for every category, meaning licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed pastoral counselor who specializes in in marriage and family therapy, adolescent psychologist, teen psychologist, one that addresses LGBTQIA community. And even though this is not something you may preach or you may condone, it is something in reality that everyone deals with on a regular basis. And if we can save a life and show our light as an example, then all things turn toward God at the end of the day. Another thing is CareNet. CareNet is a network of licensed professionals who operate on a sliding scale from free all the way up. So CareNet is located in Greensboro, Winston-Salem. They also have satellite offices. There's some located in the hospitals around the Triad, but they are an amazing group of workers whose sole aim is to make sure that people have healthy mental psyches. They address all types of issues. They have licensed pastoral counselors on staff. They have licensed marriage and family therapists on staff. And they have licensed clinical professional counselors on staff. So depending on what your socioeconomic status is, what your preference in male, female, whether you need to see a group or individual, all of that, CareNet provides that. Look up CareNet. It's local. It's available in the Triad. There's also alternatives podcasts. There's a podcast called Therapy for Black Girls, but there are a bunch of podcasts geared toward therapy and specifically for people of color, for Black and brown people. There are a lot of podcasts and they address so many different issues. Go to your Apple, go to your Amazon, go to anywhere where you can listen to podcasts. You can type in a topic, therapy, and then when you get to therapy, you can look for Black therapy or therapy for Black girls, therapy for Black boys, therapy for Black marriages. There's so many different aspects, so many different podcasts that are available to you that you can have access to. And each one is categorized by topic. If you feel like you're dealing with anxiety, you feel like you're dealing with depression, you feel like you're dealing with schizophrenia, or you feel like you're dealing with multiple personality disorder, whatever it is, you're in a relationship with a narcissist, all those topics, you can definitely use podcasts to give you an idea if you're going the right direction, if you need to talk to a mental health therapist, if you need to just get down in your prayer closet and just get real with yourself. You'll be able to figure that out, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's free. So look up your podcast and be vigilant. There's another one called Talkspace, and there's also ideas called findacounselor.com. So all of those are just simple resources that you can find and have available. But I'm pushing my biggest agenda, which is for the Black church to set up a mental health ministry by the end of 2021. That's my challenge for you. It would be great to do it before then, but my challenge is for every Black church, whether big or small, to partner with a local mental health organization so that your congregation has access to licensed mental health therapists for a small fee, or for you to set up a mental health ministry at your church and make it available to anyone in your congregation, and even those outside of your congregation, to have an idea and to have a resource, because we're supposed to be a beacon and a light. And right now, in the circumstances that we're dealing with, mental health is a big, big thing. So we need to make sure. Now, let's talk about personal resources. As I was growing up, I was always taught that meditation was a devil thing. You weren't supposed to meditate if you weren't reading your Bible and meditating on the word day and night. Meditation was the devil. But I've come to realize that when you know better, you do better. So meditation is a very important resource for your everyday life. Listening to your own breath is a very important resource. When I'm going through hard times, I realized that I wasn't breathing. I was literally holding my breath. So I say to you, make sure that you're not holding your breath on an everyday basis. Take a moment to breathe out. Chipo did the same thing. Breathing is so important. Meditation is so important. And journaling. Journaling is another personal resource that you use in your everyday life, and it is very therapeutic. Drawing, coloring. Anytime you're using the creative side of your brain, you need to make sure that you're doing that on an everyday basis. Self-care and pleasure are two different things. Pleasure is a massage, getting your hair done. But those are things that take making an appointment. Things that when you're having a mental health thing, you may not want to call the hairdresser and make an appointment. You may not want to call the nail salon and make an appointment. But self-care is the journey inward, and it's the opportunity to do something for yourself that takes nothing. So journaling, prayer, meditation, communication with yourself, just sitting there and thinking about everything that's going on and then letting it ebb and then letting it flow out. So remember, guys, prayer is a weapon, but therapy is the strategy. And make sure that you're using access to therapy as one of the biggest ways to combat anything happening in your life. Thank you, guys. That's all I have for today.
Having the Q&A session, if you'll stick around. So we are getting some questions that are coming in. Looks like everyone's coming back. Nice to see everyone again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna look at the chat here and see if we have any questions. Okay. Anyone have any questions for any of our panelists? Don't everyone speak at once. Okay. I think it's coming up on the screen now. Mr. Wilson says, can anyone speak to denial as a coping mechanism for depression or anxiety? Is it unhealthy? Can it lead to physical health conditions? And how can I identify or recognize it and deal with it? So anyone want to?
I'll just give a little bit, and then Chipo, you can take it away. But it's only because I've been asked this question. Well, I asked myself this question, but in doing some research, I found out that African Americans were twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's and dementia, and it's associated with suppression of trauma. So when you're in denial, yes, it can cause physical health conditions. Especially in African Americans, because we deal with trauma a lot in life. So your denial will cause, and I'm not going to guarantee it, but we're twice as likely. So ideally, it could cause you to have dementia and Alzheimer's later in life, which you know is associated with it's a mental disease associated with forgetfulness. So yes, your denial starts off as a small seed planted in your psyche, and then eventually over time can develop into a physical condition called Alzheimer's and dementia. So I'll start there. Go ahead, Chipo.
No, I feel like you answered the question really well. You spoke to the long-term impact. I guess I'll speak to the short-term. As I talked about earlier, your emotions, think of your emotions in a pot. So you have a big pot and you're putting stress from work in there, stress from interactions with your husband, stress from your kids, and stress from just, internal factors. You're putting all of that into a pot, and soon that pot starts to boil over. And it starts to come out. And it's interesting, as much as we suppress things and shroud it in denial and stuff, it always comes out. It is going to come out somewhere. So even if it comes out in your interactions at work with your coworkers, if it comes out when you're getting a little bit more snappy with your children, you might be at the grocery store and somebody might bump into you and you're ready to fight. So it's going to come out and in the short term. So it's best to be able to recognize. I know one of my therapeutic practices is kind of comfortably and safely confronting some of the issues. Recognizing, acknowledging is a big one. Acknowledging, you got to be able to know, like, hey, something's wrong. I'm not myself today. I haven't been myself for a few months. I haven't been myself for years. And that's when the healing process starts.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to add, yeah, those are some very good responses. You guys have answered the question. A lot of times when I'm working with people, thinking about denial, you have to think about for yourself, like how tired are you of what you're going through? How tired are you of being tired every day, of being stressed every day, of having an upset stomach every single day? You know, that creates ulcers in itself. You start to have digestion issues and things of that nature. And just think about all the symptoms that you have, the physical pain, the sadness, being away from people. When I'm working with someone that's dealing with anxiety, when they're coming in for the first time, I specifically say, what do you want to change? What are you tired of? I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of not going around people. I'm tired of just constantly thinking about this. I'm tired of sweating all the time, with anxiety. I soak my clothes. I'm tired of this. So finding out like what you're tired of will determine, how quickly or how much you really want to work on or fix whatever is going on with you. Because if you're dealing with depression and anxiety, you're dealing with stuff every single day that you don't have to deal with. If you're in denial, that just sets you back. Like she said, it's going to come out. You're going to have to deal with it at some point in time. So if you're in denial and you don't want to address it right now, I don't want to see a counselor right now, I don't want to do this, you're just putting it back. You're going to have to deal with it next year. You're going to have to deal with it the year after that. So you just have to decide, how ready are you to change? Even if you're not in denial, even if you don't know what's going on, or if you don't know if you have a diagnosis, if you don't know if you're depressed, seek somebody out, seek some professional help to see what it is so you can deal with it. So denial to me will set you back, because eventually you're going to have to deal with it. And you're going to be really, really tired of all the symptoms that you carry around every single day. And with every counseling session that you have, when you get help, you're going to feel, every session should feel like you've lost 100 pounds mentally and physically. And, people say, oh, it's mental, whatever. But physically, you are going to feel lighter every time you release something in therapy, every time you release something in a session. So denial, to me, it'll set you back, because eventually you're going to have to deal with it. And you're going to get sick and tired of carrying around all this stuff every day.
Excellent. You did a great job answering that question. We do have another question posed by one of our members, and it states, can putting others first and absorbing their needs lead to mental depression?
I will start out on this one and let y'all finish it up with some fireworks, because I'm sure you will. Caretakers, whether you are taking care of someone that is ill, whether you are taking care of your children, taking care of a spouse, all of that is it's put on you, and it's heavy. So it can lead to depression. And a lot of times when you are absorbing the needs of others, it leads more to isolation, because you don't have any time for yourself. You don't have time to gather your thoughts. You don't have time to take a deep breath. You don't have time to breathe. And so that builds up. You do have to find a time to put yourself first, not necessarily put yourself first, but to take care of your needs that you have. If you feel yourself slipping into a depression, isolating, hiding to be by yourself, most commonly very irritable, everything is ticking you off, then you're going to have to really find time to address all of this stuff and find time for yourself. Because a caretaker, like I said, whether it's a parent, an ill person, a spouse, or children, that alone is very heavy in itself. And we have to take care of ourselves and taking care of others. And when you are a caretaker, you put yourself on the back burner most of the time.
Okay.
Chipo, you want to go, or you want me to go?
I was muted. You can go, and I can
Okay.
end it in that.
Okay.
Question.
So,
Yeah.
So what I was thinking was, when I first saw what you put on the screen, I have a quote that says, the hardest thing about putting others first is that they automatically think that you're putting yourself second. So you create this environment where people automatically don't look at you as first in your own life. So that's the first thing about it. What you have to do is, number one, set boundaries for people. That's the biggest thing. So in setting boundaries, you let people know that you come first, and they're still important, but they come second. and you create an environment where people start to align with the idea or the philosophy that you've created for your own life. So yes, it can create a mental depression because a lot of times people, the new word, well, there's a few new phrases out in the secular world, I like to call it. One of them is I'm an empath, right? So everybody says they're an empath now. Everybody says they can feel everyone's emotions. Everyone is draining the energy. Everybody's an empath. But it's really this idea that you haven't set boundaries for people and you've allowed them to put all their junk on you. And because you may be a specific type of person, a caretaker, you decide that their problem is your problem. And in deciding that their problem is your problem, you've now decided and created an environment where you never come first in your own life. And really, you're not just depressed about having to absorb the other person's need. What you're really depressed about, or what you're really feeling, is this idea that you can't address the needs of yourself. So now, by setting this boundary, and whatever that boundary is, it could be, I'm only going to help so-and-so one time a week, because let's not be unrealistic. You're going to do what you're going to do because it's a part of your character. But by setting a clear boundary for yourself and for others, you change your environment and you change the energy around you. And you say, I come first. Everyone else comes second, even your husband, your children, your pastor, your ministry, your whatever. And then you take control of it, and it changes the narrative because you're the writer, right? You're the editor, you're the CEO of your own life. So whenever you decide to write your own story, edit your own story, decide what characters are going to be involved, decide what characters you're going to kill off. Once you can do that and set that boundary, then you'll be able to create an environment where people align with what you feel and how you think. And then depression and mental illness won't be a part of your everyday life because now you're in control. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm done.
So I'm sitting here like, yes. So I just, there's very little that I can add to what has already been said by these amazing women, but I wanted to just add this. Historically, Black women have been looked at as, for lack of better words, a mammy, we've been mammified, okay, to the point where we are everyone's caretaker. And sometimes you don't even notice it. You'll be at your job. You don't even be at home. You'll be at your job and you have people gravitating to you as a Black woman because you're seen as a caretaker. You're seen as a mammy, for lack of better words. You know what I'm saying? And what happens oftentimes is the energy is not reciprocated towards us. So it is vital that we exercise our boundaries. It is vital that we connect with ourselves so that we know if we're being taken advantage of, and we know that this is what boundaries look like. I think the conversation on boundaries has been an ongoing theme, and I would definitely want for those who identify as Black women to really think about, what do the boundaries look like with those around you? Are you constantly saying yes when you want to say no? Do you say no, and then do people still ask you after you say no, not understanding that no in itself is a sentence, is a complete sentence? These are all things that I want you all to kind of like meditate on and sit with. We don't have to be caretakers to the world. We don't have to hold the world on our back. What we're seeing in the mental health world, and I'm sure the other panelists can attest to this, Black women are developing physical ailments from some of the mental things that are going on. You mentioned ulcers earlier. Ulcers were mentioned earlier. Stress ulcers are a real thing. I know several Black women that have got them. And also, I think that there's things that are connected, and I don't have the data to prove it, I don't have the resources to do my own research in terms of like studies and stuff. But I dare say that there's a connection with mental health and some of the things that are happening with Black women in terms of our heart and our physical health, like our heart, the heart disease and stuff like that. I feel like the stress levels from our issues with mental health are impacting our physical health. So when it comes to being other people's caretakers, we have to do it in a way where we don't do it at all, or we do it in a way that we can still live. But you have to tap into your coping mechanisms that are healthy, and you have to tap into self-care. A lot of Black women are not tapping into self-care. So that means they're running 100% all the time and not putting back in them. So think of your, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take this whole part, but think of self-care like a well. Okay, I always like to paint a visual because I'm a visual person. So you all know a water well, right? Where you got to scoop the water up, or you got to, So you have a well, right? And when your well is overflowing, you're great. You're great. You're awesome. You're at least a 9 or 10, right? What I'm finding right now is that a lot of people scrape from the bottom of that well, all of the water is gone. So you are scraping nothing. You're little droplets. And then the worst part is you're giving those droplets to somebody else. So you're not even using the droplets for yourself. You're scraping in that well, and you're scraping droplets, and you're not pouring enough water back into your well. So you're drawing from an empty well. It can't happen. It can't happen. And so you're caretaking. And then also there's another thing that people don't talk about. Sometimes you start resenting the person that you're caretaking for. And you don't want to do that either. So because you're drawing from an empty well, you're not pouring enough back into yourself, you start resenting that person. So now every time that person calls, you look at the phone, you look at the text message, you're like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not even doing that. Or when you're talking to them, you're sitting there like, oh, my, what's that? You don't want to do that because that messes up another portion of the relationship, right? So just some things to take away in terms of boundaries, filling your well, self-care, all of those things, resentment. These are things that I just want y'all to meditate on because they all can be impactful when you are caretaking for others, especially when it's not reciprocated.
Amen. Well, this question is a personal one. How do you emotionally support students when they find that their white friends may not be the anti-racist they thought they were? And how do we support and understand their grief and also address the issue of racism? For me, that was with my daughter. She's in gifted classes, so she was usually one or a couple of minority students in the class. And so we taught her to treat people the way you would like to be treated. And the reality was that everyone doesn't subscribe to that particular teaching. So it came in increasingly personal when she was forced to have to deal with that.
So, one, thank you for trusting us with a personal question. It's definitely a safe space for that. Okay. So one of the things that I always think about as Black parents, because I'm raising a Black child, Black children, 3 of them. I want you to hear this comment with no attitude associated with it. Okay. I don't want you to think like, did she have attitude? Okay. Not at all. So I'm going to say this with that. It is not our job to worry about the impact that our kids are going to have on white kids when they are operating in an anti-Black racist society. Okay. So I wanted to start off with that. And there was no malice in when I said that. Okay. Okay. Awesome. So I wanted to start off with that because I think that sometimes with us as Black parents, we are so worried about how our Black kids are going to impact the white kids around us that sometimes our Black kids start to shrink themselves and be less than their marvelous Black selves because they're trying to fit into whatever societal box they're trying to fit. And honestly, our Black babies, especially those of us who have put our babies in, in predominantly white schools or white environments, these babies are trying to survive. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to survive. I've gone to an all-white school. I graduated from all-white high school. I'm very understanding of how it works in terms of trying to survive and us sometimes shrinking our marvelous Black selves just so that we can survive interactions with our white classmates. So with that being said, one of the ways I want to make sure I'm answering your question. So one of the ways that you can be supportive is by allowing them space to be themselves, especially at home, but letting them know it's okay to do it at school too. I know with me going, it's interesting because I think my mom is on right now. So I was raised in a super pro-Black house. And then my mom put me in a very white high school. So it was like this at home, but then in high school, it was like, so sometimes it did conflict. And actually it was a small Christian white high school. And even still, some people got cursed out. That was the younger me, okay? And so there was ways where I had to find a way to interact just for survival purposes. So one thing that I was very appreciative that my mom did was she allowed us to be so marvelously Black in our other spaces, and then told us in the white spaces, this basically do what you need to do so you can come home. You know what I'm saying? And so I appreciated her approach, and I'll pass that information on to you and even add to make sure you let them know that if something goes down with them and white students, you are an advocate without else. As long as they did what they were supposed to do and had the morals and whatever you've instilled in them, and they, you know, so basically they didn't go to school cutting up and acting a fool and stuff and then got in trouble and then say, no, it's the white students. No, if you did what you were supposed to do and something still did happen, because that does happen with white students, that your Black child can do exactly what they're supposed to do and even still find themselves combating racism and other anti-Blackness. Let them know that you have their back. That was one of the biggest things. When I knew that my mom had my back, my mom, the first thing she said, okay, I need to know the whole story. What did you do? What did you do, Chiefo? And I would tell her, okay, I did X, Y, and Z. So then she would know how to operate when she got to school campus and advocated on my behalf. My mom is a single Black mom, so she did her thing. So one of the things that I appreciated was, as long as I told the whole story and did what I was supposed to do, when things like this arise, racism, anti-Blackness, it's not always even with classmates. Some of these white teachers cut up too. You know what I'm saying? And so my mom always said, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, then I can do what I need to do. Let them know that you're an advocate. You are their biggest advocate, and you know your child. So if they're telling you something, even if the teacher is in front of you telling you something else, you just say, okay. My mom would just say, I'll discuss it when I get home. She wasn't whooping us in front of them. She wasn't yelling at us in front of them. This is a family matter. Thank you for letting me know what Chiefo did. Okay, we get home. Tell me everything that happened. And I will let her, and I'm like, Mom, that teacher was cutting up. And she's like, I believe it because I know you. So I guess the best way is to let them know that you're an advocate for them, to acknowledge their feelings. I know that sometimes when we put our kids in white environments, we can't help it because sometimes that's just the best school in the area or the best resources and stuff. It can't be helped. Acknowledging that this is a possibility, letting them know, I know that sometimes it's not even just students, it's teachers, it's coaches, it's this, it's that. I'm here for you. You let me know what I can do to help. What would you like me to do in this moment? I've had situations where I've asked my 12-year-old, what would you like mommy to do in this moment? Do you want me to go up to the school? Because you know I will. And sometimes she's all like, well, let's just talk about it, Mom. But it's just letting them know that you're an advocate, acknowledging their feelings, not sweeping it under the rug like, no, you didn't experience that racist event. No, you did experience that. How do you want Dad to handle it? And then showing your face at the school from time to time. Show your marvelous Black parenting self. Go ahead and let them know that you don't play about your Black baby. That's what I do. I pop up. Oh yeah, this is Kael's mom. This is Amari's mom. Yeah. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I would like to add to that. That was great information and great way to support our kids. The last year, to me, it has opened up a lot of doors for Black people to be more assertive and to be open with what's on our mind. I know me growing up, being in a lot of white environments, I've always tried to be the good Black person, the non-confrontational Black person. And so different things that bothered me over the years, over time, I've just held it to myself and just been pleasant. When I walk into a room where I'm the minority, I want to be the friendly Black person, And so over the past year and a half, with everything that has gone on, I've realized that has changed with me. And so supporting our Black kids with that right there, teaching them how to be assertive instead of aggressive, and letting them know that being assertive it's good. You can be assertive. You can let people know what's on your mind. You can let people know how you feel about certain things. You can let people know about things that have offended you. And it's okay. Previously, if we've done that, we've been seen as aggressive, the angry Black person. And so teaching people the difference between being assertive and being aggressive is very important, and to let them know that it is okay now to be assertive. And if people are uncomfortable with you voicing your opinion and taking up for yourself, it's okay for them to be uncomfortable. We've been uncomfortable for a very long time and having to hold things together and having to present wonderfully and having to be the non-aggressive person and to not express ourselves as much as others, because that's always going to be labeled as aggressive, no matter how it comes out. But just teaching them the difference between assertive and aggressive, and teaching them how to communicate in an assertive way and not an aggressive way is what I like to do when working with teens. With all of the stuff that has gone on in the past year and a half, the racial stuff, it's been a lot of angry Black teens, a lot of people that really, like you said, don't know how to handle things, a lot of Black teens that are dealing with friends that they thought were okay, but just teaching them how to be assertive. And teaching them that it's okay if other people are uncomfortable with you mentioning stuff and letting people know when they have offended you. That's the key to a lot of the teens that I have worked with, and it's gone over okay, because sometimes they will be aggressive. They'll let their anger and frustration come out in an aggressive way. And so just teaching them the difference between those two words and presenting information in an assertive way and an aggressive way is key to helping them get through that. So to add on to what Chipo said, teaching them those two things have made a huge difference when working with teens in the environment that we've been working on.
I'll add 30 seconds, which is I grew up I grew up blessed. Every teacher I had from 2 years old up until the 8th grade was Black. Every student I attended school with was Black. Then I went to and that was a Christian private school that was associated with my church. It was almost revolutionary during the 1990s to have 100% Black teachers teaching 100% Black kids. Then I got to high school, and I had to go to a Catholic high school where it was 100% African-American girls and 99% white Catholic nun teachers. And it still went okay because our parents taught us how to interact. My 11th grade year, I moved to upstate New York, where I was the only African-American in a class of 432 children. So talk about a culture shock. I had never experienced a white person in my entire life until I was 16 years old. I had always been in an environment where I was told I could do anything. I was put in an environment where I was told I could reach the stars, that I was a king. I always knew Jesus was Black. I always knew that God loved me. I lived in a bubble. And my mom told me, she said, this is the world. Where I had you was not the world. And you were blessed because it could be your world, because even when I stepped outside of that, I lived in a Black community. Every person I interacted with was Black, but she was like, but this is the real world. And you need to know how to interact in this world. Because I cried. I mean, I bawled, because I was like, these people would say things that I've never even imagined they could even say, but they had this sense of entitlement. And my addition to that is, at 16, I had my mom come to a parent-teacher conference because it was a teacher that was acting up. It wasn't a student. It was a teacher who would talk to me condescendingly. You sure you know this? Are you? I know you're from New Jersey, so you're not that smart. I know you're African American, so you're not that. You need a little bit of assistance. And it was just like, okay. And my mom, I'm 5'2". So when I told her my mom was coming, nobody expects my mom to be 6'1.5". So when she walked into the room, it was a different aura. It's a different level of respect. And it's like, yeah, my mom was like, and what's the issue? And what's the problem? Because when I told her I had to go to parent teacher conference, she was like, Kelly, I ain't been to parent teacher conference in 10 years. I said, oh, but you're going to want to come to this one. So I say that have a script. It's okay to have a script with your children. Practice questions. Like if someone says this to you, this is how you're going to respond. And I like how you said that you work with teens and you teach them, but sometimes teens need a script. They need to know if someone says, my cousin encountered where they said slaves were in the Bible, so there was nothing wrong with slavery. There needs to be you need to have a script where you can say, yeah, but God said you treat your slave as your brother. You need to have comebacks to these kids in school because they are prepared with all this racist and anti-Black agenda. Well, all lives matter. Well, yeah, colon cancer matters, but during the month of October, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We're not minimizing colon cancer, but right now we're dealing with breast cancer. So right now, Black Lives Matter. We know that all lives matter, and we're not minimizing anybody else's life. But if they have that script, they not only have an answer, but they have the confidence behind it. Because then they can interact and have communication. Yeah, parents, we made up the script, but nobody got to know that. So you just get a list of questions that they may encounter and get a list of answers and have your kids and practice with them how to respond to these types of things.
Amen. And just to make a quick comment, we're going to do the last question that's on the screen. Yeah, the question I asked was something we dealt with in middle school. So she since moved on and is quite the little militant person now. So she's kind of the female Huey Freeman, if you will, now. But the last question, it says, I love the theme of the conference. Can you speak about why peace must be pursued?
Okay. I can start on that one. To me, peace, I think everybody can tell in their life when they have peace and when they do not have peace. So my question back to you would be, if you have peace in your life, list the things that you have. If you don't have peace in your life, list the things that you have. No peace in your life, your list is going to be so negative. So negative. And when you actually find a place, or if you ever gotten to a place where you have peace in your life, your list looks completely different than it is when you had no peace in your life. So pursuing peace for me is like getting to a place to where everything in your life is manageable. Things are not perfect, but they're manageable. If things come up, you're able to deal with them in a healthy way. And you can only do that when you do have peace in your life. When there is absolutely no peace in your life, everything is just haywire, you're unorganized, you're not able to pull things together, you're not able to reach goals. And that's when more of the mental health symptoms start to show themselves and start to be prevalent. So to me, your list that you have of things in your life when you have peace is more positive than when you don't have peace in your life. That list is based on deficits. I don't have this, I don't have that. And it's just a lot of deficits in your life when there is no peace.
Man, I agree. The word pursuit is to go after, right? So a lot of times we feel like things are just supposed to fall in our lap, and that we're supposed to one day just acquire it. And things, God does promise certain things to us, and he also just makes certain things available, right? So wisdom is something he said, wisdom is available to all who ask, right? So you got to ask for it. It's not just going to fall into your lap. And the same thing with peace. To pursue it means you have to go after it. You have to put action behind it. You have to do something in order to acquire it. So for me, I literally looked in the mirror one day and said, I hate myself. I don't like me. I don't like anything about me. And I wasn't talking physically. I was talking on the inside. And I said, God, give me peace that passes all understanding. I didn't even know what that was. But I knew it was in the Bible, and I knew I wanted it because, like my beautiful host on the panel said, it's something that when you look at the list, you know it's associated with something that keeps your life in order. But it's something that you have to actively pursue, right? It's something you have to actively go after. And once I actively put things in place in my life and I asked God to give it to me, I figured out what it meant, because people will come up to me and say, you're going through this? I never knew. And it's like, oh God, that's that peace. People don't understand it. I got it. Okay. It doesn't mean I won't go through things. It doesn't mean that life won't crash around me. It doesn't mean that I'm 100% going to raise my kids right or 100% be the perfect wife. But what it means that at every single day, I choose to do something that's going to bring me closer to balance, closer to waking up with a smile on my face. And I don't really wake up with a smile because I'm not a morning person, but on the inside, I'm smiling. So wake up with the inward smile. Wake up with the inward, because they say the journey inward is the longest but most fulfilling journey. So it's important to pursue peace, go after it, take action, because the benefits of peace will be long-term control, long-term balance, long-term gratitude, it's just so many long-term benefits to going after peace that once you receive it, it's something like God said, no one will really ever understand it.
That's good. I have very, very little to contribute, but I will say that for me, the way the inner peace looks like, it looks like being centered. It's not always going to be that you're up here. You know what I'm saying? I think when people think about peace and stuff, they always want to be up here and stuff. But sometimes peace is simply being centered. And if that is with your relationship with God and then yourself, however you view peace is going to look differently. So what I would like to, leave you all in terms of peace with is just making sure that your well flows over. That is one of the ways to be able to center yourself, making sure that you are not drawing on a daily basis from an empty well. And that means that you are constantly working on self-care. What are you doing to come back to center? Is this you reading your Bible? Is this you writing down scripture? Is this you going to Bible study? What brings you back to yourself? Is it you exercising? Is it you connecting with friends and family? What makes you you? And so in connection with what makes you you and what brings you to that center place of you is where peace is going to be found.
Amen. Excellent. I'm going to do the final remarks. So I think our pastor is logged on. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for contributing your time and your expertise, sharing that with us and providing us some great insights, some great materials and resources that hopefully everyone took note of and tapped into, because mental health is a very prevalent issue, especially within the Black community and the Christian community as well. So we talked about the stigmas and everything associated with seeking treatment and various things of that nature. And we feel it a blessing to have each and every one of you with us to share your knowledge and insight on this very important matter.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting. And this concludes our conference. I hope this will be one of many that we will have going forward in the future. And we're certainly the suggestion by Dr. Dixon to have a means of the church to tap into mental health professionals and so forth goes right along with the vision of our pastor. He wants us to be a source church where people can come and tap into different resources. So that definitely is right along the thinking of our pastor. And we certainly appreciate all of you and your contribution. And may you continue to be blessed and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.